Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Movement. I've been gone a while, about a month, and with good reason. I've been doing a lot of research. There has been this concept that has been floating around in my head for years, ever since I was probably, I don't know, 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there. And it was just a theory. I didn't really have the power to really go and explore it and prove it. But now, with the power of the internet, research tools are so powerful. You can actually go in and get a lot of insight very quickly. And so we're going to jump into this. And life inspires you to really kind of do some work, especially if you are trying to do the work, which I think I am, which is why this channel is here. Are these things that I discover as I go along trying to do the work, which means that I have work to do, which means that there's a lot of things that I have to work out. And I think we all do. We have those things. And me saying this, by no means, and I really want to stress out that I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. But this is a platform in which the things that I uncover, the things that I discover, I feel like somebody might be able to get something out of them. And the reason this episode is being recorded and published is because I get tapped on the shoulder about when next episode is coming out. That I'm grateful. I'm really appreciative of having that type of community where we're all basically in the fight together, on the journey together. We're all trying to figure out what's going on and better ourselves and get through the mess that we have been given. And so this video, it's a long time coming. Like I said, ever since I was, before I turned 20, I had this thought, and it's been sticking with me for years. And now I have the time. Now I have the power of the internet and the ability to research these things. And is the idea that when people come together, a human relationship, interpersonal relationships are like algorithms. And, algorithms are basically sets of instructions to figure out a problem, or sets of instructions to define something, how something behaves. But you can use algorithms to solve a problem. And I always thought that when people come together, they form one of two different types of algorithms. Either a finite algorithm where it eventually stops. And, those aren't necessarily bad, but it explained to me as a kid why certain relationships, could be friendships, romantic relationships, work relationships, whatever the case is, but usually the ones that didn't clearly have a context which you knew that they were going to stop. And you have the finite ones, and then you have the ones that are seemingly infinite. The ones where you could go without talking for days or years, and you catch up, and it's just like two peas in a pod, instantly clicking back together, and like no time is gone. And to me, there's something intrinsic in those two different types. There was a very defined dichotomy. And at that age and at that time, it was kind of hard. I didn't really have access to the internet. I didn't have access to a lot of things, but it stuck with me. And lo and behold, as I'm doing the work, this pops back up, and I really ponder, why certain relationships, some of them may burn bright and be intense, and then they just fizzle out. And then there's some relationships that you come through, friendships, romantic relationships, or relationships that you don't even know how to label because you really have a hard time figuring out what they should be. But they're long lasting, they stay around, and they're part of you. Those long-term relationships, they have characteristics, and there's certain things that allow them to persist. And in this episode, we're going to talk about that. So we're going to break down some things, some human things, and we're going to examine some algorithms, specific types of algorithms, maybe by name, But we really want to, what I really want to talk about is how trauma and personality traits, because those are the factors that we bring to the table, and our experiences can define the types of relationships that we end up in. And we can compare those patterns, the things, the behaviors that we bring to the table, and we can liken them to, or we can compare it to finite algorithms or short term relationship. And we're going to draw parallels between that and then infinite algorithms or long term algorithms. And through this analogy, I think we'll understand, or there might be an explanation of why some people are more inclined to have short-term relationships, or they kind of find them in perpetually in these like very short stint relationships, while others tend to, invest in long-term connections that involve over time. And some of the things that I we might get to, I don't know if we will get to, but we'll get into trauma's role in this, the types of things that, the types of behaviors that come up that may come out, like, avoidant behaviors or hyper independence, anxious attachment styles, and how those dynamics can actually drive a a relationship into a finite space. And you'll kind of see things as we go along, as we explore this analogy. We'll talk about personality influences. There's traits like openness or closeness, emotional stability or instability, attachment styles, and how those things affect your ability to stay in a long-term relationship. Whether, again, and this is not necessarily romantic. It's, do you have long-term friends? And then we'll talk about what are these long-term, what are the characteristics of long-term relationships? What are short-term characteristics? What are the things that we look at, and how do all these factors play together? And by the end, I think we'll have a clear understanding of how your personal history and your character shape the way you approach love and connection, friendship, and whether you're looking to build close, intimate relationships, or you're puzzled by why some connections fizzle out. We're going to try to figure that out, or at least dive into it, because I have a feeling this might be multiple episodes. Because in the last month, I've been really like digging into this, and it's so interesting how much material that I've been able to find. One of the things that I wanted to put out to just say before I forget it is, when I was really looking into algorithms and the various types, and the ones that had a finite, output set, and the ones that had an infinite output set, the two ones that came up were basically like a search algorithm, or like a greatest common denominator type, where you have a number of steps and then it stops when it finds the answer. It solves the problem. It fills the X, the hole, the question. And in that finite algorithm stops once the need has been met. But each time that algorithm passes each step, there's a funny thing that happens. And that thing is, it reduces the possibilities each time. And you'll see almost every single time in a finite algorithm, each interaction tends to reduce the possibility. And this is so fundamental in everything that I've seen, right? Everything that I've looked at. It reduces the possible outcomes until it comes down to one. And eventually, that one, once that's spent, will be the last. And it's an interesting thing. So if you think about a search algorithm, you go through and it's scanning and it's looking, and then it finds the criteria, and then it might stack rank it, and you'll have the most likely of what you're searching for. If you look, like for example, Google, we search, on the internet, and it has thousands and millions and billions of different things that it can, that it has to look through. And then, there's so many ways of optimizing these things. But the thing is that, when we type in a word that we're searching for, all under all of that, we get one set of results. And there's so many processes going on, so many steps and so many cycles of that algorithm until it refines it down to what it thinks that we want to see. And that is pretty much, what happens. And then the infinite ones are additive and they will continue to expand and there is no end unless it's forced to end. And a good example of an infinite algorithm, and it's probably one of the most beautiful ones that we will come across, and day in and day out, I deal with this algorithm pretty much every day at work. But we see this in life, and it's the Fibonacci sequence. And if you don't know what that is, the Fibonacci sequence is just a simple sequence of adding two numbers in a sequence. And then the output is added to the set of numbers. And then you take the last two and you add those. And it starts out with 1 plus 2 equals 3. And then 2 plus 3 equals 5. And then 3 plus 5 equals 8. And 5 plus 8 equals 13. And so on and so forth. And that sequence, again, if you look at the set of instructions, was to take two numbers, the first two numbers on the line, add those, and then add that to the set, and then add the last two numbers on that line. And what the Fibonacci sequence does is gives us the golden spiral. It shows up in petals on flowers. It shows up in conch shells. It shows up in a number of other places in nature. It's a very natural phenomenon. And we're able to capture that in math, in an algorithm. And the interesting thing about that is that for it to keep going, it has to be adaptive to the input that it gets. And it constantly adds to itself. It allows itself to grow. In those two, in the juxtaposition or putting those things side by side, the fundamental nature is that finite is reductive and infinite is additive. And then what does that mean? How do we take that in practicality in the human experience? Well, one thing is, and again, this is why this is going to be a series, because I haven't even gotten into the actual material. I'm just setting up the foundation of what we're going to explore, and we have a lot to explore in this. So if you look at just that feature, right, where in the finite algorithm example, each pass reduces the potential values of what the answer is until it finds and solves the problem. Okay, great. Well, if you look at, like, let's say steps or cycles as interactions in the relationship, again, it loses its potential value, the potential streams of reality that you can end up in. If you see it that way, you start out with infinite possibilities, and then the next time you hang out or you interact, then it's less infinite. And then because of whatever disagreements, inability to resolve conflict, not open to change, a number of things can reduce the potential possibilities. Then the next time you hang out, maybe there's a disagreement. Maybe there's some sort of misunderstanding or insult, or something happens. And then each iteration, slowly but surely, you're reducing the potential possibilities out there. The set of numbers, the set of outputs gets smaller and smaller and smaller, until eventually, again, it stops because there's no more potentials, or there's just one. And you realize, okay, the potentiality of this isn't as big as I initially thought it was. The stream, the answer, once it's found, wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Or another way, and that's kind of a negative and sad way of looking at it, or these shorter term, these could be transactional relationships where you're working with a person, let's say you want to work with a plumber, and you You start out and you go in the phone book, you look on the internet, you read your reviews, and then you finally reduce these things out, and then all of a sudden, you have a plumber at your door, and then, or whoever, and then they fix your thing, and then you pay them the money, and then you're gone, and they did a good job, and you never see them again. That's not necessarily bad. That's actually good that you don't have to see them again. In that context, and that solves a problem. But the same framework ends up really removing people out of your life. And if you look at it in a functional way, yes, in an emotional way, it's sad, like especially if they're friends. I think most people start out, in friendships and social interactions, wanting things for a long time. I think that people tend to want to have friendships that last a long time. They invest time into those friendships. They put energy into those things, and they want them to last. And it's disappointing when these things start to fizzle out. But the point that I'm making is that when we see a depreciation, when we tend to count the negatives or subtract values or subtract overall value from the relationship because we're unwilling to forgive or adapt or change or evolve, those things will end up leading to shorter relationships in that context. On the other hand, infinite types of relationships or long-term or infinite algorithms, they're additive. They take values they appreciate over time. And again, those things, the characteristics, I have a graph. I made a graph of this. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. So there's a interesting, infinite, some of the characteristics of infinite algorithms is there's an ongoing process. There's indefiniteness. And infinite algorithms are processes that never terminate. They continuously generate results or new outputs indefinitely. And again, we talked about the Fibonacci sequence. Long-term relationships share parallel. They're an ongoing journey where the process is defined, it's worked out, and both individuals continue to evolve and grow together. And there's no definitive end in sight. The relationship is designed to grow over time. Think about the Fibonacci sequence. Eventually, those values grow bigger over time. And the focus is on sustaining the connection rather than reaching some sort of specific endpoint. Now, think about it. If you start a relationship because you're lonely and you want to feel the loneliness, once the loneliness met, the effort, the algorithm stops. The need, the search, the journey stops at that moment. But if you're thinking about something that lasts over time, there's something more to be said. I'm going to bring this in. Waterfall versus, this is development terminology, and this is a little bit of jargon, but waterfall development is where you have like a plan. You plan everything out, and then you get the plans approved, and then you have a goal, and then all of a sudden you start developing it, and then you develop it, and then you launch. And the problem is with that is that process is very disjointed. And if you have a mistake and you have to you have to adapt, you have to go back to the planning phase, which sometimes can be costly, and you wasted time, and you have to go back to the drawing board. And it's just not an agile way of working. In the agile framework, you have ways of biting off small things and iterating and improving over time and tackling small challenges and delivering on those things, right? And it allows you to adapt over time. And that's something that infinite algorithms have. They have adaptation and continuity. New outputs are produced based by the prior steps. Again, the Fibonacci sequence, same thing, that each new number depends on the previous two numbers, right? And similarly, in long-term relationships, growth or adaptation occur over time. So just like long-term relationships, growth and adaptation occur over time. The relationship builds on past experiences that are shared together. And then it deepens as each partner navigates life, their challenges, and they achieve these milestones. Each phase of the relationship influences the next, creating a continuous cycle of development. There's long-term commitment and development because infinite algorithms are designed. They're designed. There's effort. There's design that's put into these things to run indefinitely. meaning that they're built for long-term stability rather than short-term efficiency or short-term gratification. Long-term relationships also require the same type of commitment and ongoing investment. And here's the thing. When we dive deeper, I promise you, we're gonna dive deeper into this because we're already at like 27 minutes before I edit down. The focus is not on reaching a specific goal quickly, but nurturing the connection over time. Things you're gonna have to work for things. If you're unwilling to work for things, then well, it's just not gonna work. If you're unwilling to work for things, it's not gonna work. It just doesn't work for you. I mean, I think that's kind of a romanticized fairy tale, I think. I've learned that over time is that you have to work for these things. I mean, hell, you have to work on yourself in order for you to work, or you're dysfunctional. And, very few people come out, and are handed a very functional way of living. There's always some sort of trauma you bring in or that is given to you, and you're just stuck dealing with it. And in order to really kind of figure those things out, you have to be aware. And this is the foreshadowing of some of the next episodes that are coming. But again, these relationships often involve greater emotional, intellectual, and physical investments. Like optimization algorithms and machine learning algorithms. Those things, it takes a lot of investment to make those things work. So, and let's take a look at a few characteristics of relationships. What is the finite characteristic and what is the infinite? Goal orientation. The finite algorithm has a clear goal and stops once it's achieved. The short-term relationship might not have a clear goal. If you spend some time looking and understanding what motivates you, fear of being alone, not wanting to be alone, wanting somebody there, whatever motivates you, right? Once that goal is met, then you kind of lose the motivation. The dopamine hit doesn't really, or the dopamine doesn't continue flowing because you've been gratified. Whereas in the infinite algorithm, it's an ongoing process. There's no clear end goal in sight. And maybe the goal is just to keep going, which is very similar. Again, it's process oriented, the day to day. Does the day to day sync up? Does it work? Does it make sense? And again, the end goal could be like until death do we part, or the end goal is just to have your back, to just have your back. I got your back. But there's no specific thing you're trying to achieve. And that doesn't mean long-term relationships don't have goals, but the process allows you to accomplish all of those goals, right? Whatever you give to it, it's like a run loop in a game. Whatever input you send to it, it's going to process it, and then it's going to do something. And then on the next cycle of that run loop, it's going to look for a new input, and it's going to react to whatever it needs to react to. And that's like a run loop of your life. Every single day, every second, whatever cycle you want to look at it in, you're getting new input. Life is giving you new things. The interpersonal relationship is giving you new things. Capoeira. If you bring it back to capoeira, every hall that is going to be different, and you react to that input, and it's infinite. Time frame. It's kind of redundant, but again, finite, limited duration, focused on completing a task. Again, clear goal, very, very purpose driven, and sometimes maybe you're working for somebody. And again, it doesn't always have to be your relationships. It could be, I want to be your friend. I want to be your friend so that I can get some status, or, I want to be with you because I want to be seen with somebody successful. I want to get back at my ex, or, I want to, do whatever the case is. It could be a lot of trivial things, but once those things are done. Whereas, the time frame of infinite algorithms or long-term relationships are indefinite. It's focusing on sustaining the algorithm or sustaining the relationship over time. Nature of output. Finite one-time result or a specific finite output. And that could be a set of output, like a set of values, can be a single value, whereas infinite algorithms are continuous and evolving output. Adaptability. Interesting. Finite, they're less adaptive. They're actually defined for efficiency. And this is interesting. Infinite or long-term relationships are highly adaptive. They grow and evolve over time. You're not going to be the same person tomorrow. And if you're thinking things are going to stay the same way, you're going to be in for a big surprise. Yeah, fundamentally, your core self may be your intrinsic self may be similar. Think about it. If you're active individuals when you're younger and you lived and you traveled all throughout the world, and now you're in the last stages of your life, did you appreciate and love that other person because that you were able to go on these adventures, or did you just enjoy their company? And are you able to let those things go and grow and explore the adventure of life and everything that it brings, even though it might not be so fun? It might be filled with knee problems and health issues and declining health and eventually death. Emotional intensity, yeah, and this is going to be a long episode. Emotional intensity. Let's take a look at that. So finite algorithms are fast. They're, like we said, they're designed for efficiency. They're very highly optimized. We want what we want and we're going to get it. We're looking for something specific, especially if we've had a couple iterations or if we feel like we're in a rush to do things. When we're in a rush, likely those things end up being finite anyways by the nature of how things work. And so in those finite, this is funny because this was interesting, and we'll go in and show how this works and the future episodes. But emotional intensity in finite or short-term relationships, they're very likely to have short bursts of intensity. It's just going to be intense. It's going to be fast. It's going to be, you connect. It's shiny. It's great. But then that high, that peak, once that hits, and if you think about dopamine, you build up tolerance. And over time, then eventually you don't notice the effects. That isn't a sign of something that is sustained. Where in the infinite algorithm or long-term relationship comparison, there's sustained intensity that may fluctuate, but it persists, keeps on going. Investment. Again, since these finite algorithm short-term, relationships, the investment is pretty low. It's interesting. The things you'll usually hear it and like, yeah, I'm not willing to do that. Or you can be like, yeah, I'm in. And you're in to deal with whatever comes up because whatever reason, maybe you're naive. Maybe you're naive and you're like, yeah, I'm all in. Or maybe you just genuinely are all in and you're figuring it out and you want to build something long term. But again, interestingly enough, there's two people in these equations, and it doesn't matter who in the equation is willing to be in a long-term relationship or continue to be a long-term friend, because both people have to have these qualities. Both of these people create the algorithm. Both of them have their own instruction sets, and you combine these instructions together, and then that's what determines the output. And so when people are able to take their time and form deep emotional and personal connections and invest in those things, those tend to be, signs of longer term relationships overall. And the other thing is focused on finite algorithms are focused on getting things, done quickly. We already talked about that. And this was a focus on a process versus result. And finite is results. I want this now. I want this, X, Y, Z. If you look at it in a affirmation, you might want to think about this when you write affirmation. Do you want somebody to share a life with, which is more process-based long term? Or you want specific qualities or, a specific situation, and that's a result. So we covered a lot. And we haven't even gone into the meat. This is the first time I've really been able to explain this stuff in depth. This is I mean, I got so much material on this stuff. Again, I know that I said that we were going to cover the role of trauma responses. We will. Emotional stability, openness, and like characteristics of how attachment style, personality and attachment style, what makes certain people prefer to be in very short term relationships, or sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't prefer. Sometimes we think on the surface level, it's interesting. And I'll close with this because this will kind of set us up. On a surface level, many people do approach relationships, romantic or friendships, with the intention of seeking out a long-term connection. And this is either, especially the romantic aspect of it or motive, relationships. This tends to be shaped a lot by like societal expectations, cultural norms, and personal ideas about love and partnership. Now, I'm not saying that a long-term relationship, is questionable, but it's a natural thing. And most people want to find stability. They want emotional support, companionship, and these are typically associated with long-term relationships. However, while the initial intention may be a long-term relationship, the reality of how people engage in relationship is often dependent on deeper unconscious factors like trauma, attachment style, personality traits, and life experiences. These underlying elements or factors will drive individuals towards either a finite algorithmic relationship or infinite algorithmic relationship or dynamics of a relationship, even if they consciously express a desire for long-term commitment. And those are the factors when you look at the instruction sets. That's what algorithms are. They're instruction sets. And when you look at what the instructions are, what to do, the behaviors give us instructions and we do them. The beliefs, and like I mentioned, the personality traits, the trauma, the attachment styles, and the life experiences, it tells us, it informs us, it motivates us. It incentivizes us to do certain things. And as we act out on those things, that influences that joint algorithmic output. So we'll leave it at that. This is the longest episode by far. I know that I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut it down. And we definitely have a lot more. I'm very excited. I'm pumped up. I'm glad I took my time on this. I'm glad I dug deep. And until the next episode, think about this. Think about your interactions with people. Do you tend to detract from people? Do you tend to detract from their value? And here's the thing, it doesn't even have to be a person. In the end, if you're always talking negatively about your job, if you're talking negatively about a person, if you're talking negatively about anything, it's depreciating within your mind, within your personal experience, within your soul. And you're effectively speaking it out of existence, or you're creating a scenario in which it will halt and no longer be in your life. But if you are speaking positively, you're appreciating, you're attributing more value over time to whatever it is, a job, and not always. Again, sometimes some of these algorithms externally are forced to stop, but we are not the cause of them stopping. And again, just like the first principle of 7 Hermetic principles, mentalism, it's all in our mind. It's all in how our mind sets up and creates the reality around us. And so as long as we're attributing value, and if two people are doing the same and they're living it, I think you're in a good spot. So that was the first episode of many about this idea, this topic, this theory, this foray into analyzing or looking at relationships through the eyes of algorithms. We split it up into 2 principal types, infinite and finite. And we're going to take a look at various algorithms and examples. We talked about a few already. But until then, take a look and really just look around, pay attention, be mindful about the inner dialogue and maybe the external, the audible dialogue towards the people in your life. And you can start seeing the characteristics and you'll be able to see. I think you'll be able to call it. So thank you. If you're still here, thank you. This was a long one. And I appreciate your time. And I'm excited to see you again.